Okay, I'm here with David Heinemeier Hansson of 37 Signals, who just published the book Rework. I'm first of all happy that there's somebody who has a family name that people misspell even more than mine, which is good. And I prepared immensely well for this because I read this over the weekend. And the first thing that struck me is that it's the same color on the cover as my cover of Catch-22. It's my edition of that, so I hope that's not
the publisher of that. Actually, it looks slightly different in the US. In the US, we had a completely black cover on it. It's almost the same, but apparently silver works better in the UK.
Okay. So, if you were to give me like a one-sentence pitch, why should I read this?
You should read this if you want to start something. So we're writing this as somewhat of a yeah, it is. Halfway manifesto. It's a paragraph. I'm extending it. It's all commas, so you can count it out. As a manifesto and as an instructional manual at a high level on how to start a business. Not how to start a startup, not specific necessarily even to tech. Obviously, all of these learnings we have came out of building our own company. That's the only thing we talk about. This is not a case study of how other people ran their business. We pull other people's examples out when they match our own findings. So every single essay in the book is something that we learn from experience. Not from theorizing about what could possibly work, but just from looking at what worked for us over the past decade.
Okay. When I started reading it, I had the impression that it is something like a Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug for businesses. Because Don't Make Me Think, I think, is a book that everybody who touches interface ever to for customers should have read. Because it's a 40-minute read that gives you a no bullshit explanation of what usability is like. When I finished it in one fell swoop, which I now realized is actually a bad idea of reading this book. It's more like a guidance thing, like read it one at a time and mull it over a bit. It ended up like W3 schools, where you basically go with a problem and you find a very quick solution and you have no idea about the context of the solution and how you can implement it.
Yep.
So, did you get this feedback from other people already as well, or was that?
Yeah, there's sort of two camps for it. There's the one camp that takes the material as being mainly inspirational and eye-opening, as in, oh, this is just opening up, this is stuff you could do. I didn't know. Like, I thought that businesses were supposed to be a certain way, and I thought they were supposed to be structured like this. And it gave me the motivation to start something. So that's the happy camp. The sort of slightly unhappy camp is that if you come to it expecting that we'll tell you exactly how to do stuff, or give you the full sort of gamut on each of these topics on exactly what hiring should be and the steps and the tests that we would do and so on. It doesn't do that. It's not an instructional manual on the detail level. And there was no way we could condense our sort of decades worth of experiences into an instructional manual that we would want to read. So we wanted to write a book that we would read. And just as we were saying about products, that we make products that we want to use, we wrote the book that we wanted to read. So the key requirement there was that it could be no longer than 3 to 4 hours to finish it. Because that's how much I will spend on any book. Business book, I should say. If I have to spend more than 4 hours, I will not finish the book. So we wanted to write a book that people would finish, preferably even in a single setting, because then they could get back to work. So it would be sort of like a jolt of energy, a jolt of inspiration, and perhaps opening their eyes to what they could do on their own. Much more so than are you exactly going to follow what we're prescribing here.
Well, I've read a lot of these books. I mean, like there's like Richard Branson's autobiography. There is like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and then there is Spider and the Starfish. And all of them are amazing, and you get very excited, and you go to your boss and say like, oh, we do our training that way now, and we do it, and then like it fizzles out after 2 months. So, do you think the book or the ideas? There is a chance that there will be a follow-up book made by somebody else, how you could apply some of those in another environment that is not 37 Signals. Because a lot of it is like you say, you build your product for yourself, you write the book for yourself.
Yes.
That's like saying I write the documentation of my system for myself. Which sadly enough, most developers do. That's why most of the documentation out there is not comprehensible.
True. But I also think that the alternative was just something we were not going to do. We were not put in the world to sort of explore how other people do stuff. Like, this is a byproduct of our main business, and our main business is that we develop software. So this was the book that we could write. The other book we couldn't write. We were not going to dedicate the time, the resources to go out and explore, like, how could we implement this in other businesses, or, like, that's hard work. For us, this was, in some ways, easy work, because we took the things that we had already learned, all the experiences that we had over the past decade, and we just wrote them down. There was no research in this. Like, we didn't sit down and say, all right, let's come up with 80 essays on how to do a business. And then we'll think, maybe number X could be this. No. We look back over the past 10 years of what we've been speaking about, what we've been blogging about, then we took sort of the greatest hits. The greatest hits of all the ideas we had over the last decade, and we just compiled it. Which some people do also. If you know everything there is to know about 37 Staples, if you've seen all our presentations and listened to all our podcasts and read the previous book and so on, there's not going to be a ton of new material. For us, the big part of this was we were going to broaden our appeal outside of a sphere of influence. We were not just going to talk to developers. We were not just going to talk to other web people. We were going to try to see these ideas we had here. We've heard enough feedback from the first book we wrote, which was called Getting Real, which is a lot of the similar thoughts. That was out as a just self-published PDF. We heard from people from all sorts of industries that we didn't think there was going to read it. It was sort of like we discovered that there was teenage girls in Indonesia using our product. We discovered that there were architects or blacksmiths or any industry you can come up with. We had somebody from there read the Getting Real book, which was all about software. And then they told us, guys, this is not about software. There's nothing specific about software here. If you just took the references out to Basecamp and your specific situations, all this stuff would apply just as well to my industry. So it was like, I didn't know that. Like, I didn't know that all these industries could get something out of it.
Well, this might be a bit, this is one of the things that I found as well. I mean, a lot of these ideas is like, to me as a pragmatic developer and as somebody who has the same writing style as you have, I basically write down everything I know and then I delete a third of it.
Yes.
And what's out there is basically what's there to be published, which is always the best way of doing it, because you just let it flow, rather than like, oh, how I structure it, what do I do with that. One of the examples that I saw in there was the hot dog stand, where you said, like, when you have a hot dog stand, you don't think about the relish, you don't think about the mustard, you think about the quality of the hot dogs, because that's your main product.
Yeah.
Which is, to a degree, true, but you also should be sure that in this area of town you're allowed to sell hot dogs.
Sure.
Or in this area of town isn't a town that is like Muslim, where they don't necessarily want to have hot dogs.
Right.
So you debunk planning a lot in the book. It's like long-term planning. But I think, especially with software, we have to make sure that some things we plan for, you should plan that your software will be hacked sooner or later, or somebody will try to. If you think about...
That's not something you can really plan for.
Oh,
You can have it as an idea, or you can care about security, I agree with that. But it's sort of the nature of you will be hacked has sort of a component of the unknown. Like, you can do everything you can on security side of things, and there's still a pretty good chance that there'll be a hack. Like, pretty much every piece of software of any material or complexity has been hacked, or can be hacked in some way. So it's just sort of the planning, how much do you get back from it? Versus just saying, all right, this should be pretty secure. Or it should be secure enough for our criticality. If you're again building like a Barbie configurator for Indonesian teenage girls, what's the security ramifications here if you get hacked? All right, you should get a green dress. Like, who cares? The security...
Or they can see porn and you go to jail.
Well, that's probably right. You will probably not be held liable for being hacked when somebody's showing porn on your side. I mean, I'm saying, like, there's some eventualities, and then you assign appropriate risk. Like, what is the appropriate risk that I will go to porn before go to jail because somebody hacks in and shows porn on the side? Very good. What is the likelihood if, say, I'm running PayPal, that somebody's going to try to hack me to transfer money? That's great. Like, there's probably going to be teams in Russia springing up all over the place to try to hack me, which is exactly what happened, of course. So, you assign your level of criticality relevant to what it is. We're pretty medium criticality. We don't deal directly with any money, but we do deal with confidential information. If we get hacked and somebody publishes the business plans of some big company, we will be in trouble.
Yeah.
So, pretty big criticality, we should check it pretty seriously. But not at the same level of criticality and seriousness as PayPal or NASA or somebody else who has, like, people will die or people will lose material amount of money. So I think that sort of just helps inform your, like, you can spend a lot of time on a lot of things, and you have to choose. And you gotta choose, all right, I can spend my time making this product awesome in such a way that people want to buy it, or I can spend all my time, say, on security. Like, if I have product that nobody wants to buy, it doesn't matter how secure it is. It can be Fort Knox of software, but if nobody wants it, who cares? So you got to treat it in sort of orders of relevance and importance.
One thing that confused me about the book was the pick a fight chapter. Basically, like find an enemy in the same camp, and you say like we're aiming for that.
Yep.
And later on, you're actually more into my area where you say like we don't really care about the competition. So that's a bit of a disconnect.
It is a disconnect, but it's only because there's two opposite ends. So there's either you don't care about what the competition does, you don't pay any attention to them, at least publicly, you don't address them, you don't talk about them, blah, 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 blah. Then there's the middle road where most people are, where they sort of talk about competition, or they sort of mention them, or don't mention them. There's a little bit of an arm's distance, and they don't want to be disrespectful, but they still talk about them. And then there's the extreme of saying, all right, we're going for Basecamp for a while, it was Microsoft Project. We're going to be the unproject. We're going to be the opposite of what you would get out of Microsoft Project. The ends, they work. The middle, I don't think works at all. So you got to either be militant and aggressive about it and full on put a bullseye on something, say, as for Basecamp, we're going to be the unproject. Or like the car company, Hertz, like, no, like we're number 2, as in, like, we try harder because we're number 2. Like they're going specifically at one company, and then they're saying we're not that. And there's a few other examples. But I agree, like that's sort of a sophisticated strategy. Do not try this at home if you're not sure of what you're doing or you don't have the passion for it. We're pretty passionately against Microsoft Project as a way of running project. For the 90% of the time, you should just ignore the competition.
One other thing was that the amount of like advertising yourself by having a blog out there, writing down what you do. I totally agree with this. This is basically how my blog started as well. I just basically had it as a scratch pad of things I don't want to forget and I don't want to do again. So I keep using Google to find my own solutions.
Right.
I take this even further, and I have several clashes with our PR people because of that, because if my competition does something awesome, I write about it.
Right.
Because it gives me a confidence, it shows the market that I care about the technology and not only about my company, and it may shame my competition into saying something good about me when I do something as well.
Right.
Does that work for you?
I think that's great. I don't think it works, I think it works better in like technology. Like when it's something that's more implementational. I think it doesn't work as well as like Abbas saying good things about Hertz on rental cars. Like there's some sort of level of consumer-ness where I don't think necessarily works as well. But we do it. We've even done it. Like we've called out on, I forget, one of the user interface posts where we call out, all right, these guys had a really cool login form. Even though they might be a competitor or slight competitor or something, you can still call it out and say it's cool. I full on agree that it shows that you have confidence enough in your product. We do actually somewhat of the same things where customers write into us and say, I really like Basecamp, but it doesn't do X, Y, and Z. And if those X, Y, and Z are things that we will never do, we will say, here's another, there's a couple of competitors who do that. You can find a competitor that does scan charts, for example.
Well, we had that earlier. I mean, you vehemently disagreed with when I said, why don't you allow for add-ons and modules? Because you said we don't have the control over the main software then.
Yes.
But my example is, for example, Photoshop 3 when I started. Photoshop 4 was absolutely terrible for web development because you couldn't save JPEGs.
Right.
Newly Smart Saver made it useful.
Right.
Adobe saw that software, implemented it, then had a JPEG export in Photoshop 5 and made it a tool for me that I can use as well.
Yep.
With open source, it's even more important. Take jQuery. jQuery, the JavaScript library, I think most of its success is because it allows people to write plugins to find solutions for edge cases that jQuery core doesn't want to think about.
Yep.
So I understand that you say you don't want.
Well, I'm on board with that.
Yeah.
So we have APIs for all our applications, and they're pretty well used. Like for Basecamp, I think we have 60 sort of other products that integrate with Basecamp and offer something else. Like for example, there's a lot of people who ask for invoicing. We don't do invoicing. There's other apps that integrate with ours, like Harvest and I forget what else they're called. But they use the Basecamp API to offer basically invoicing on for our apps. The thing is, for us, that's a third party. So if the experience there is sort of a little jarring, like it's not perfect, that's like people know that there's this level of separation. If we were the ones offering invoices and we were doing a sort of shitty job at it, that would reflect very poorly on us. So there's a little bit of firewalling between the image that you build up, and if we stamp 37 signals on something, it damn well better be pretty awesome.
Like, well, isn't that what things like Facebook do? I mean, most of the systems nowadays that are successful are open and allow other third parties to make money by building applications that run within the social frame of that piece of software.
Yeah, having a platform is definitely a good thing, but I still think that there's that division. Like, so the iPhone has what, 200,000 apps? Like, I've downloaded more of my favorite apps that not only sucks, but sucks badly. Do I think less of Apple because of it? No. But if that app that I downloaded that was so bad was Apple's, I would have thought pretty badly of them. So you just have to set it up in such a way that users know that there's a difference here. There's like the stuff that Apple does, which is good by Apple standards, and then there's the other stuff that can run on their platform that might be as good, and it might also be complete shit. And as long as you have that running, then I think it's awesome. And we do the same thing. We encourage everybody to build on top of the platforms. We have, for all of the applications, we have APIs, and I think that works great. I think the web is awesome for that, like the architecture of the web and how you can integrate it with APIs and so on. Excellent.
Okay. In terms of Ruby on Rails, which you guys released for us, and one of my favorite demos of that is that and it shows the randomness how things can work out. One of the biggest scaling things for Ruby on Rails is Rework.com.
Yep.
And I don't know if you know this, but it's lovely. It's a social network for people for knitting and crocheting.
Right.
And you would expect this to have 90 users, but
Right.
it's the biggest thing out there. It has like 3.8 million photos on Flickr and things
Right.
like that. And it's just great when you have a talk like that and you have a piece of software and people say, it doesn't scale, and then you
Right.
with a complete left field example.
Right.
And say like, this is what it uses it for. What feedback do you get on that? Are you still part of that society, of that group of developers? Do you still feedback into the system with things you build, or did you learn from other people scaling and put it back into your own system?
Absolutely. So Ruby on Rails has a core developer group that does the commits themselves, and about half of those guys work for 37 Signals. We constantly put in anything new that we need at 37 Signals. We either put in or release it open source. One example, we just translated Basecamp into 9 languages, and we built a little tool called Talk to do the translation part, and that plugs into Ruby on Rails, and anybody who wants to do a translation can sort of have a UI for controlling the translation. We just release that as open source. Anything that is not the core business itself, we release it open source. Anything that's infrastructure level, anything that's a tool, anything that's like a framework or anything else like that, open source is just fantastic. You get it out there, and then you didn't give up anything to get it out there. You just put it out there. It doesn't cost you anything to put it out there. And you get free stuff back. You get people submitting patches. You get people testing it in areas. You get them finding bugs and fixing bugs. And you get all of this wonderful stuff back from the comments, which is why I find it's like, oftentimes, or sometimes, open source and business are sort of put on opposite side. I don't understand that at all. To me, they're exactly the same. In the sense that, for most businesses, they should be releasing every piece of infrastructure that they're working on as open source. If they are so lucky as to drum up an open source community around the tool that they're making, they're getting all this free development. I'm not paying any of the mini committers to Ruby on Rails for their bug patches and so on. I'm getting it for free because I gave them something. That didn't cost me anything because I built it anyway.
Well, it's in markets but they're not regulated. That's the main issue. I mean, it's easy to poke fun at people that don't open source their products, but in some cases, for example,
well, not their product. I want to make that distinction. Basecamp, Highrise, Campfire, all our applications are never going to be open source. This is how we make our money.
Yeah.
So, open sourcing that makes no sense to me unless you want to be a consultant. Like, that could make sense, but we're never going to open source. So for me, it's not, like, I don't have that Richard Stallman, it's the moral obligation to open source all software. No, I think that's a crackpot theory. I'm glad he's out there and providing some input to the debate, but I think that's way off base. But it's all the stuff that's around. It's all that helping stuff, the infrastructure stuff. If Basecamp was built on PHP or Java, like, it could have looked the same. So there's nothing in Ruby on Rails that's secret sauce.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing that, all right, you could only build Basecamp in Ruby on Rails or whatever. So it makes sense for us to open source.
The problem was that I worked with local government, I worked with finance companies, and every time I saw a really, really cool one solution to one problem, open source piece of software, I tried to implement it. It was with the lawyers for like 3 months, because they have to go through every line of code to see if it really is only open source code and it's not stolen from somewhere else. So how can we crack this? I mean, to me, I don't care if it's your product or if it's Microsoft project. I want to make end users happy.
Right.
And it's
well,
easy
firing the lawyers is a good start. So I think a lot of times lawyers will drum up work to have work to do. So, and this is true for so many things, even for our business, where if you just don't interact with them, stuff will be fine. Like just as you said, like yes, there's a chance that my Bobby configuration site could be hacked by hackers who want to show porn to kids, but the odds are very, very slim. The odds that I'm using a piece of open source software, just like I'm a local government in Germany somewhere, and I'm using a piece of open source software, and somebody somewhere stole a line of code somewhere and I get sued, what do you think the odds are? I mean, there's bigger odds of being hit by Mars. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So the problem is a lot of business managers, and especially business lawyers, they have no sense of probability. They can't fathom that concept. So they treat the probability of 1 to 10 trillion as the same as 1 to 100. And like, we got to deal with this 1 to a trillion probability because what if it happened? What? No, doesn't matter. Don't care. So as soon as that sort of sense of probability spreads, that people can treat that reasonably, I think all this nonsense just goes away and people start using it.
Okay, one thing that I encountered, which drives me crazy, but is a thing, changing a culture is probably the hardest thing to do with everybody. So I encounter people, and I've done computers for a long, long time. You see people using Office software or things like that. You know there should be a one-button solution for a 7-step process.
Right.
But people are happy to use the 7-step process because that's what they learned in the corporate training. And unlearning that would be too much for them.
Right.
What could you do about this? Can we crack that, or do we just have to wait till the Luddites die out?
No, I think just starting, you're there because you got there. So you had a too complex product to start with that required a 7-step project or process for something simple. You are to blame. We have exactly the same issue with Basecamp. We sometimes start something that was a little bit too complex, very rarely a 7-step process, but something that was a little too complex and we try to change it, users don't like that at all.
Yeah.
Some of it is just, that's too bad. Some of it is just too bad, you will revolt, but you will revolt for 3 days. And 3 days is the pain it takes for you to get used to the new model, and then you will be happy as a clown. So part of our rollout process is just ignore feedback, or I shouldn't say ignore, pause or capture feedback and put it aside for 3 days until sort of the initial outburst dies down. And once that dies down, you can make a reasonable decision about it.
All right, I'm getting frantic waves, so we'll have to stop here.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Yes, it's a pleasure.
Good to see you.
All right, thank you.